General Grievous, fearsome Kaleesh warlord and tyrant of the Separatists, was one of the most gruesome and violent weapons that Dooku had at his armada and at his disposal at any moment. A creature that entered the Clone Wars as a nobody, but left as one of the most feared Jedi killers in galactic history. Over the years, Grievous was forged into the perfect Jedi Slayer, being routinely subjected to the vengeful torrent of battle, and forced to adapt, using his cybernetic enhancements to his advantage when it came to butchering Jedi, and those that held the gift of the Force, something that he was extremely jealous of. Over the course of the war, he became a myth to be feared among the Republic, and multiple Jedi Knights feared ever having to encounter the onslaught of General Grievous, as many, even the most seasoned Jedi Knights in the Order, had ever faced down a threat this dire nor aggressive, using their own weapon against them to insult them and prove his superiority. So then, was there anyone that Grievous himself came to fear? Was there anyone that General Grievous, despite his prestige and promise, believed he would lose in a fight against? The answer to that question is actually yes, and that there were several. So, who did General Grievous fear, and who did he believe he would lose to in a duel? First and foremost, perhaps the figures that General Grievous feared the most were his own superiors, that being Dooku and Darth Sidious respectively. These two Dark Lords of the Sith each intimidated Grievous for their own reasons, which varied drastically from one another. Dooku was feared for a very different reason than Grievous feared Sidious. In terms of Dooku, Grievous was intimidated not merely by his battlefield prowess and skill with a lightsaber, but by his political influence as well. Dooku was the very face of the Separatist movement, which entailed a variety of advantages which could be held against Grievous at a moment's notice. All of the forces that Grievous commanded belonged to Dooku. Grievous has always been an avid hater of the Jedi Order and everything they stood for. Only now, the Separatist cause gave him a platform to act on this hatred, providing him with his own army of battle droids and political support to wage war on the Jedi. This is what motivated Grievous. He now had everything he needed to conduct a legal genocide, hiding under the guise of being a soldier in order to enact his own personal vendetta. But although Dooku was a gifted swordsman and talented Sith Lord, his ultimate power was the ability to strip Grievous of these advantages at any given moment whenever he wanted. Dooku could cast Grievous aside, turn his armies on him, and render him a fugitive of both sides, stripping away from him his very purpose. From here, Grievous would have nowhere to hide or escape without anyone on either side avidly hunting him, and although he was more than capable of defending himself, he would find himself amiss and without purpose, unable to utilize the very same platform to continue this war on the Jedi. Not to mention that General Grievous did have respect for Dooku as well. He knew that Dooku was quite possibly the greatest swordsman of the era, and in some twisted way, he was honored to learn how to butcher Jedi from the greatest of the Jedi. In a straight-up duel, Grievous was weary against Dooku during all of their sparring sessions, but deep down within himself, he believed that he could still best the count, whether this was true or not at all. Darth Sidious, on the other hand, ingrained an entirely different brand of fear within Grievous, simply due to how little was known about the elusive Sith Lord and mastermind of the war. Sidious was the ultimate emperor of a fabled practice, a practice that was able to contend with the might of the Jedi for millennia on end, and even surpassed them in terms of raw power and sheer strength. Yet despite this, Grievous knew next to nothing for certain, and was reliant only on myths of the Sith in order to provide him with any semblance of knowledge regarding what Palpatine might have truly been and what he had been capable of. His identity was a mystery, and so too was the true scope of his immense power. The Sith had been dormant for 1,000 years, training in the shadows and continuing to amass the power to rival the Jedi. Each passing generation of Sith became stronger than the last, with the Master and the Apprentice learning more than those who had come before them. And Grievous had no idea how much power truly entailed them, or how true these stories might have been, or if they were simply myths and he was a fool. He also knew that whoever this elusive Darth Sidious was, he was more than just a lightsaber combatant. He was a master at manipulation and tactician who surpassed even the tactical prowess of Grievous himself, and he knew it. Not to mention that this was in fact the master of the dark side at the time. Grievous full well knew that whoever the Sith Lord was, he had a plan to stop him and break him at a moment's notice. Not just hunt him down, but cripple him entirely whenever the Dark Lord wanted. Here, Grievous understood that he was merely a pawn who was being given the honor of enacting his own holy war, but he understood that stepping out of line would incur the wrath of the ancient practice, and the likes of which could only be theorized and rumored within his cybernetic mind. But while he most notably feared his two superiors, was there anyone who served the light side that Grievous believed he would be unable to defeat in one-on-one combat? Were there any Jedi that Grievous was afraid of? The answer is yes. Over the years, Grievous intimidated any surviving Jedi who faced him, even going as far as to cause Mace Windu to avoid him in an outright duel. Windu, who was predominantly regarded as the Order's greatest swordsman, sought to avoid Grievous at all costs. But for a full breakdown on why exactly this was, be sure to check out our Why Windu Refused to Duel Grievous, as that serves to go into a more in-depth analysis. So then if not Windu, then who would General Grievous be apprehensive to face? Early on in the Clone Wars, Dooku took the time to warn Grievous about one Jedi, Yoda, who he believed to be the only Jedi capable of besting Grievous in a physical battle at the time, which begs the question, what made Yoda different than the other Jedi aside from his age and the title of Grandmaster? The likeliest explanation has to do with his unique stature and acrobatic prowess, and this is why Dooku warned Grievous about him specifically, stating that there was no way that Grievous would ever be able to overcome Yoda. Grievous fed off of his innate ability to learn and mimic the styles of Jedi Knights that he had fought against, learning their patterns and copying their abilities in order to refine himself into the best possible fighter, as well as response to a lightsaber form of any given Jedi. This allowed him to learn techniques incredibly quickly, but he was still limited by his own physical capabilities and the limitations of his own body, not to mention his inability to touch the Force. He tried to circumvent these limitations by continually adding various cybernetic enhancements, which heightened his stamina, strength, and reflexes, but was still among the largest physical threats of any Separatist roster. Still though, none of this could compare to the might of the Force. Grievous's imposing stature and sheer bulk made him one of the most physically impressive soldiers, but it was unideal when it came to learning a style such as Yoda's, or dueling Yoda specifically. Yoda often utilized an incredibly acrobatic version of Form 4 lightsaber combat, taking advantage of his size and making one of the most flexible and versatile fighters the galaxy had ever seen. Hence, the style would have been incredibly difficult for Grievous to adapt or to mimic at all in any sustainable fashion, and it is likely he would have meant that Yoda wouldn't have been one of the very few Jedi capable of besting Grievous in single combat. Whatever the reasoning may be, Dooku foresaw something that made him fear an interaction between Yoda and the General. Something within Dooku propelled him to say that Grievous should never try to contend with Yoda, and the likeliest explanation has to do with Yoda's incredibly acrobatic style and intense gifts in the Force, two things that Grievous would have ultimately been weak to. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of this explanation? Do you think there was anyone else that Grievous feared? And do you think that there was anyone who he should have reasonably been afraid to fight at any point in time? What are also your thoughts on Dooku saying that Yoda was the only Jedi that would ever be able to defeat Grievous in single combat, at least during the time of the beginning of the war? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. May the Force be with you, and I will hopefully see you in a later video.